I have recently been very concerned, as we have found out, about Tulsa Public School District funding some programs through the Chinese Communist Party that they allowed into their school. This is pure propaganda meant to undermine our American institutions. Under no circumstances should a child in Oklahoma schools be exposed to indoctrination that is funded by our foreign adversaries. This will stop in Oklahoma. We will be requiring school districts to report any funding where SDE to us where foreign dollars are being used directly or indirectly through nonprofits. I'm also going to be asking the state legislature to dive into this issue as well. I believe it's of the utmost importance that our parents know that when your kids attend our public schools, they will not be under the influence of a regime that is there and dedicated to undermining American institutions. With that information, we have included a special report that we would require of districts, and this would be an action item. So I do want us to discuss and give any feedback. If you'll look in your binder there under Appendix A, and our General Counsel, Brian Cleveland, is here to answer any questions as well, if you guys have any for him. But we tried to make it as clear, direct as possible. So you'll see there that they will have to list all foreign governments or organizations funded by foreign governments that contributed to funds or in-kind funds during the last school year. And we will also require a specific amount of funds and a description of any in-kind services. We feel that this will give the board the ability to really look and see how the money is being spent, what are the materials around the funds, so that we can continue to ensure that there's nothing inappropriate in regards to indoctrination going on to our schools from a foreign government. So discussion, and Brian, is there anything you'd add to that?
No, I think that's straightforward. Just remind the board that, of course, the exact terms in the order or the deadline is all at your discretion. So if you have any questions or revisions you want, let me know and I can mark it here.
Ready for any discussion? It will require a vote of the board, so we can discuss. And I know several of you, we've had questions on this, and we've had some of these discussions one-on-one outside the board meeting. But again, any discussion, feedback, or we can move for a motion to approve.
Will this encompass third parties such as independent contractors or companies hired outside of TPS?
Good question. Yes. Could you kind of explain, Brian, how that would circle those groups up as well?
Right. And so that's why we have the general term right now is organizations funded by foreign governments. Organization, just a broad umbrella term. And so it's capturing any of them that, like Confucian Institutes, are taking money from a foreign government, even if they may not be the government itself directly. So as long as you're comfortable with like funded by foreign governments as being the correct description of all of those, I think organizations is a sufficiently broad catch-all term.
Broadcast, that also includes nonprofits.
Yeah.
And that's, again, where we saw the workaround here is this money was being funneled to the Chinese Communist government through a nonprofit. We have to ensure that we don't allow adversaries or any nonprofit that's working in tandem with our enemies to try to get this money into school. So again, this is transparency. I think that we have to ensure that that loophole is covered as well. So that's why we wanted to include those groups as well.
And so at this point, your request is simply a data collection. There's not a action plan or anything. It's just to say, what's going on? Let's just get all this information so that parents, kids, citizens can see what's happening, and then we'll make decisions later.
Correct. And what this will allow us to do is we're looking into the next legislative session and potentially some legislation around it, getting the information to see how broad the problem is, exactly what type of materials are we looking at, exactly what nonprofits are involved in this as well. I think will give us a lot better scope and understanding and information to go into the legislature and speak more intelligently about, this is what we found, here's where we found it, here's the amounts, here's the curriculum. So we feel like this will really help us ensure that this doesn't continue to go on.
And so to be clear too, at this point, we don't know if it's a minor problem with a few small dollars and something easily addressed and not really being damaging to our education system, or if it's a major problem. We just don't know, and this will help resolve that.
So, my position is I think it is a huge problem in that we've let them in the door. I think that this is pure manipulation by Tulsa Public Schools to say, we're going to go ahead and take this money. We saw several institutions that did this in the past, that when they funneled this through a nonprofit, they rejected it. And so we see them playing the game with the Chinese Communist Party to get it in there. So I think one classroom is a huge problem for me, but to your point, I can't tell you how much, I can't tell you how many classrooms. I can't tell you if there's other districts involved, because again, this practice of funneling through other organizations really does make it difficult unless we start requiring that information for us to even really know the scope of the problem and how many kids it's impacting.
Okay.
But thank you for that question. I think that's a very good question.
I move approval.
A second?
And we have a motion and a second. Ms. Terry, do you mind calling roll for us?
Mr. Burdick.
Aye.
Ms. Lisa. Aye. Ms. Queen.
Aye.
Ms. Wilson.
Aye.
Ms. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Principal.
Aye. Motion passes. Appreciate the board and their willingness to tackle that and help us get this information so we can ensure that our kids are getting a great education without being undermined by the communist Chinese government.